And the other thing to say about drugs is that, like everything else about us, but even more so, drugs are subject to the your genetic heritage of drug receptors. And so it's not the same for everybody, or even close to the same. I mean, the range of response to drugs can be over several orders of magnitude and can vary throughout your life. So, you know, the fact that I can smoke endless amounts of cannabis and still produce and function, it just means that I can. I see people, you know, alcoholics who drink. I mean, if I have more than a drink and a half, I have headaches and I pay my dues.
Alan.
Ladies and gentlemen.
You're having a nightmare. What if it's true?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Alan, it's a possibility, isn't it?
The very word secrecy is repugnant.
Secrets.
In a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers,
Constant, extreme danger,
which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger,
extreme danger,
that an announced need for increased security.
What the hell is going on?
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park.
Will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
You're crazy.
And no officious, high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes.
Isn't the Pentagon suspicious that all the building would blow up?
Or to withhold from the press and the public
I think you're just looking at things for the first time.
the facts they deserve to know.
You've had your whole fucking life to think things over. What good's a few minutes more gonna do you now?
The facts they deserve to know. They deserve to know. Deserve to know.
Welcome to Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park, coming to you live from Toronto. And it's about time to raise your fist. Oh, yeah, that's a good time to cut out. Perfect. How did that happen? Oh, okay. Must be a live show. Is it a live show? Yeah. It's a live show. And what happens when the internet's not working properly in a live show? Well, then you just have a gap in the show.
Facts they deserve to know.
Doing that. Thanks for the advice. Raising my fist. I'm always raising my fist. It's got to be done. Either that or you get run over by the bullshit factory. Welcome again to our show. This is, as I said, Green Crush with Alan Park. These are the crushes. I'm the Alan Park. These are the conspiracy queries. We're going to cover it all. We have a great guest today. For episode 103, Oh, there it is. Episode 103 of Conspiracy Queries and episode 31 of Green Crush. Thank you for joining us today. So, how do we begin this episode? There's a lot going on. We're going to do that. Thank you very much. Try to keep it to the opening and closing of the show, please, with the monster in the back about the fist. Okay, let's just bring that down a little bit. Yep, there goes the sleigh bells. See, the sleigh bells are taking us off to another chance. You hear that in the background? Yeah. It's going to be a weird show today, folks. I'm going to confess right now, I have done the least amount of preparation for this show, this particular episode, than any of the other episodes whatsoever. I've been focused on it intently, it being the show, ever since June last year. So we might even make a year. I don't know what number we'll be at by the time that happens or if it matters, but we'll see. You would think it would be 52 at that point, but it doesn't always work out that way. So, so here we go with the show. Okay, so I wanted to get right to what I was teasing about last week and discussing was that just before we get to the guest on the show introduction, I was off to the doctors there a little bit ago, a week and a half ago, I guess, get some staging tests. Haven't had those for a year. And I'm exactly the same place I was a year ago. All of the blood levels are normal. And when I say blood levels, there are certain various different blood levels they will check, relevant or germane to your particular illness, whatever that might be. So I'm not going to list them all, but there's a CBC in there, and there's a alkalytic phosphatic acid count, which is very important in my case. I know that sounds like a commercial maybe for a laundry soap or a pop to drink. But alkalytic phosphatic acid is the substance that when your bones are showing a lot of activity in this, it means they're either building up or fizzing away. And it's kind of hard to tell which one it is if you were to just look at a picture. But if you already know that your bones were fizzing away, which is the case with me, hey there, welcome to the show. If you've not heard it before, I'm this cancer guy. I got stage 4 cancer a few years ago. Gave me a year to live, and it's way past that now. How did I do it? That's why you're listening to the show. So now I'm at this position where I have to keep going in and getting tested and staged, because once you get to stage 4, there's no going back, they say. But I keep just staying where I'm at. In other words, you can tell I've had cancer. They'll say that there is cancer, and maybe there is cancer, but if there is cancer, it's not surging forth. As I have discussed, and I don't even know where all the episodes are where I've discussed the specifics of my case. Certainly the earlier run of episodes, maybe 1 through 10, where I got fairly detailed and gross about a lot of things. Because that's what it is. That's what you need to do. And I haven't been there for a while, but I have mentioned many times that when I was first diagnosed, they gave me this highly recommended option of a testosterone suppressant, and I was taking that. But this was said to be something that I would just it would help me ease on out, is what the good doctor said, and in a year's time kind of thing. And so I took that for a few months, and then I stopped. And then that was in 2014. I stopped. I took it for about 4 or 5 months, and then I stopped taking that. And then 7 or 8, 9 months later, 9 months later, I crashed pretty hard in 15. Went to the hospital again, and got really fixed up with a fantastic doctor who I get along with greatly, and he got me fixed up. And one of the things that he did also was to put me back on this testosterone suppressant. It's not the same one. It's a different kind. It's far less antagonistic in the way of side effects. Far less than the first kind, which I won't mention right now, but, it'll all come out eventually. So I was using that one for a while, and now I've decided to stop as of last October. Which would be October 2017, I made the firm decision that I'm going to move on without this testosterone suppressant, which, depending on who you speak with, and by that I mean doctors. It'll help you ease on out, or it'll help you do fairly well. You're basically taking the gasoline off the fire, but you're not changing the fact that there's a fire there and the person's going to die soon anyway. And I can't prove I'm not going to die soon because that's difficult to prove. I'm not going to die soon. So, if 5 years from now or 3 years from now or 10 years from now, and that's when I get to say, hey, guess how long I lived? But I'm already 3 years past the best before date. And so this is all bonus time. I don't know why so much of it's shitty, but if it's bonus time, but it is right now anyway. So I'm now with this cancer. As the official position is I do have the cancer. It's not doing anything, and my bones that if everything's perfect and peachy keen with you, your bones are going to show up white, very white and light gray here and there, and very smooth on an X-ray. And mine, I look like a leopard. Now, I had a bit of an argument with the technician there when he was looking at these images from the CT, or was it the bone scan, one of them. And he thought I looked like, I thought I looked like a leopard. And he was more pushed to say that it was a cheetah look. And listen, get your wild cats right when you're doing bone metastases comparisons, or it's just not going to fly. All the kids are doing it. So I said it was definitely more of a leopard than a cheetah. And then the technician reminded me, I'm only a technician. I'm not able to discern this per se. You'll have to take it up with your doctor. And my doctor, okay, I said, don't even go to Ocelot with this. Like, is it a cheetah or a leopard? And my doctor has confirmed it's far more like a leopard than a cheetah. So that's why technicians can't tell you the thing, because they never, they don't know. They're just taking pictures. So that's what happened there. I have these spots. If I were in trouble, they would hurt. That's the thing. You can feel them, and everywhere where I had them before, particularly my chest, the plate there, the sternum, all over the bones of the whole thing. It was gross. Anyway, I don't feel any of that problem. I cycle, I exercise, I do all kinds of things. I've lost some bone mass. That's harder to build up, especially at my age. But it's incredible to me to know that I am never not going to be called a cancer guy. It's strange to think that, those marks are on my bones, but when you see charred wood, you don't go, oh, look, the house is burning down. It was burning and it stopped. And so, I don't know. I'm just going to keep going with this now. I am on absolutely nothing as of. My last injection was in October. It was meant to last 3 months. The effects probably last a little longer than that to bridge a gap in case you can't get back in right away. But for the last 2.5 months, we're 2.5 months, or getting close to 2.5 months now, none of this, and I'm only sporadically taking the cannabis oil. And that means from time to time. A little bit here, a little bit there, take some to go to sleep. But I'm going to start taking a full course again soon because I'm not messing around. I mean, I'm a stage 4. I was given stage 4, and they won't let me out of that. So like I've said earlier, I'm stage 5. That's what this is. When you get to sit here and talk about your own funeral that never happened 3 years ago, it's a very strange feeling. I'm a bit at odds with the world right now. Definitely at odds with what's going on in a lot of the news and personal, and just there's a lot of let's say ponderance of life itself when it's constantly booked into 1 month appointments. And how's my blood this time? And how are my numbers today? And is it okay now? Is it okay today? Next week it'll be good too. And you're just setting these markers out additionally to hit. And I've been to the point where I just don't care about those markers anymore because I was hitting it out of the park every month. And now I'm still hitting it out of the park, but now I'm feeling the weight of doing it, like going in and getting checked. It's a drag. It's a friggin' drag. But I got to do it because that's how I know this stuff has been working. And that's how I have to continue with my life. And I guess that's why I'm still here, to show people that this can be done. I'm going to put this in my mouth. Hang on. Bit of a numbing agent there. And so let's get on to the science section. Let's do a science thing. Now, this is not a Harrison Ford movie, so don't get too excited about the crystal structure of the human cannabinoid receptor, CB1. I talked about this last week, so I'll say it differently this time. This is in ncbi.nlm.gov, National Institute of Health.gov. The cannabinoid receptor CB1 is the principal target of tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. Are we with us so far? Okay, a psychoactive chemical from cannabis sativa with a wide range of therapeutic applications and a long history of recreational use. So there it is in the science. Therapeutic applications and a long history of recreational use. And yet today we still have politicians deciding it's one or the other. And they're so off fucking base. CB1 is activated by endocannabinoids and is a promising therapeutic target for pain management. Yes, obesity, inflammation, and substance abuse disorders. Isn't that amazing? If you use this properly, if you learn how to wield a hammer and bang down some nails, it's not necessarily a damaging thing or a weapon of war. It's a creative thing. I'm getting to the science of this frequently and often now because I know soon the Canadian government harm reduction standards for children indoctrination 1984 Orwell report will be out along shortly. And so I'm just stoking up the front end of a bunch of shows with some science so that you can easily countermand that nonsense when they finally pump it out. So you're controlling all of those things. Here we present the 2.8A crystal structure of human CB1 in complex with AM6538, which is a stabilizing agonist. An antagonist. Synthesized and characterized for this structural study. And it reveals key features of the receptor and critical interactions for the antagonistic the antagonist binding. In combination with functional studies and molecular modeling, the structure provides insight into the binding mode of naturally occurring CB1 ligands. Naturally occurring, folks. And such as THC and the synthetic cannabinoids. And then they tell you at the end how they're going to try to synthesize that into they're trying to make some pharmaceuticals that can do this, which is amazing because they've already got the plant that does it. Let's talk about our guest today, and I have a couple of items to bring on before I bring him on. Our guest today is a Canadian comedian and an author. And the reason he's an author has more to do with his psychonautic explorations than it does comedy. His book, Shamanic Graffiti, is it Shamanic? Let's say that. Shamanic Graffiti, 100,000 Years of Drugs, 100 Years of Prohibition. Very provocative title. It's probably closer to about 103,000 years of drugs and 114 years of prohibition, but he's got nice numbers up there. It says on Amazon, it says, Freud said dreams were the royal road to the unconscious, and then along came a superhighway, psychedelics. Personally, we can access the psychedelic experience, but Frank Ogden, who is the co-author of the book, and we'll find out about him from Marcus, shepherded over 1,000 people's experiences. What is presented in this book is the howling unconscious released from the normal chemical constraints that restrict it. It's written in the simple but vivid style Frank popularized in his best-selling The Last Book You'll Ever Read, and presents an alternative history of the brain and its functions. Shamanism, giving real-world examples, the book finishes up by exploring the theories of two preeminent psychedelic theoreticians, Dr. Timothy Leary and Dr. Stan Grof. And it looks at the future of psychedelic drugs, which is also very exciting, and I think our author will get to the point where he's telling us how these things are going to increase in their acceptance in society. But just before we get to that, some quick news. You got to know this shit, right? That's basically what it comes down to. This is the shit you got to know. Let me just prove it to you by reading it. I'm stalling, can you tell? Here we go. All right, let's see. Where's that thing? Oh, system overload. We got a system overload. You're not kidding, man. I've been having system overloads all week. That's why I don't trust any of this AI stuff. You ever talking to your phone, do voice to text, it writes it down exactly the same way, and then changes it, and then maybe changes it again, then you press send, and it's the wrong thing, and you're an idiot. That's why I don't trust AI. Okay, so this is a bit of a drag, huh? So this is in the businessnewsnetwork.ca. They're going to play dirty. Legal cannabis industry set to battle the criminal market. Yeah, I'll bet. With the legalization of recreational cannabis fast approaching, Canada's leading pot players are preparing for a historic transfer of wealth. Billions of dollars worth of black market sales are expected to shift to a fast-growing group of legal producers. There will be a multi-year rollout, where I think we really do become the source, says Canopy CEO Bruce Linton. In anticipation of that, investors have pushed Canopy's stock price up more than 850% in the last 2 years, boosting that company's market capitalization to $5.5 billion. These are big numbers, huh? It's similar to the time after Prohibition, says industry expert Jay Rosenthal. Once the legal ban was lifted, consumers stopped drinking moonshine because better, safer options were available. Buying untraceable cannabis from a guy in a parking lot is just not going to be able to compete. If that proves to be the case, the black market has plenty to lose. This is starting to sound a little bit like a scare piece. They already told the black market, you guys are on notice. And yet they continue to make moves to keep the black market in existence. According to Statistics Canada, Canadians spent an estimated $5.7 billion on cannabis last year, with the illegal recreational cannabis accounting for the vast majority of that, at $4.6 billion. Bill Blair used to be the police chief in Toronto, shepherded in a bunch of rights-oppressing laws when the G20 took place here in 2010. He says the easiest money criminals make is in the illegal production and sale of cannabis. So now he's changing that to the government's going to do it, and it's going to be the easiest money those criminals make in the illegal production and sale of cannabis. Anyway, he told, he's now the parliamentary secretary. He shepherded a lot of this stuff together, so we're told. He used to be a cop. He told BNN in this television interview now in February, just last month, we're now going to compete effectively with them and give Canadians a better, more responsible choice at a competitive price. And some of my fellow police officers are involved with companies that sell this stuff. But they're not criminals. Just incalculably immoral. That's all. Amoral? Let's throw both. An amoral, immoral sandwich is the cop who's now running a weed business. For the past 2 years, Blair has served as Prime Minister Trudeau's pot czar, while the former police chief is one of Ottawa's biggest cheerleaders for a legal market that he reaps massive benefit from. He's also the first to acknowledge black market producers won't go down without a fight, and they won't go down with the existing legislation either. So the big guys are trying to get bigger because look what's happening. The senators are getting upset about it. Maybe they're going to say no to this. Canadian senators. Kind of concerned about a lot of the things that don't make sense. We could spend some time talking about driving, but while Kathleen Wynne and the folks in Ontario and Canada try to tether the gram to a controllable price, just low enough to make it cheaper than the black market and just high enough to make enough money but not to glorify it as a potential, thing to do with your life. Because it's bad, right? So that's why the government's going to run it now. I don't know how they're going to tether a price at both ends. They can't even, they're dealing with people complaining about TTC transit fares, bus fares, urban transit. And they're going to try to tether cannabis at both ends of the pile to make it just so. Well, guess what? It's shit your pants time, Kathleen. Marijuana prices in Oregon have dropped to below $2 a gram. What are you going to do about that when we get that kind of technology going across the board? And you can make your own for $2 a gram. And then you're going to have an infrastructure of brick-and-mortar stores like the liquor outlets that we currently have. And you think you're going to... What are you going to do? Peg it at 180 to compete with the black market stuff? Okay, good luck. Good luck. All right, so that's some of the shit you got to know anyway. And so now, without too much further ado, I'm going to call Marcus back because I want to talk to him about a bunch of things. And here we go. Let's get it going on with Marcus. He's on the line. I can't wait to talk to this guy. He's a comedian also, so that's always fun. That's always fun when you know a guy who's a comic and he's got a different thing going on now. Now, where are we here? Ringity ring, ring, ring.
Good morning.
Good morning, and it's good morning in Vancouver and good afternoon in Toronto. We are on the line with Marcus Rummery, broadcasting to you from 234 King Street East, the fantastic Pacific Junction Hotel, where they make food that tastes good, and they have liquids that are fun to drink. I mean, what else do you want, really? And then we have this broadcasting booth in here, so that's where we're coming from. This is a eggplant digital media creation. And let's create some times with Marcus Rummery, the author. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
On
Can
being
you get an
author.
immoral sandwich at the Queen Elizabeth though? I'd like to try that.
It is a good one. It is a good one. It is. Everybody can understand. Everybody has a little piece of that one.
Sure.
You know, the amoral, immoral sandwich. It doesn't really matter anymore, I guess. So listen, I want to tell everybody, this is a gentleman here who's, he's slightly younger than me. I'm not going to tip the hand here. Listen to this lovely thing you wrote in the book that he sent me. And also, I'm gonna say that we're gonna be giving away some other books. So maybe Kim will talk to Marcus later. But this week we're also gonna give away a Dr. Sam Malachi book. So sorry to use your time to sell Sam's great cannabis conspiracy book. I'm a little scattershot this week.
I'm happy to sell Sam's book.
Okay, you should be, and we'll get to that. Let me just clear some mess out of the way here. This is the Shamanic Graffiti book, 100,000 Years of Drugs. I love the way you just said the word drugs right in the title. And 100 Years of Prohibition. That's the book. Look at this. I got bookmarks all over the place. But you don't have this copy. Listen to this. Alan, before the Late Show one night, so this is stand-up comedy someplace, folks, because we're comics. And like I said, I'm older, probably started earlier than Marcus. Before the Late Show one night, you told me to knock it out of the park. He puts it in quotes. Here is my attempt. Thanks for your encouragement and heart. All good things. Now listen, here's the great thing about this. I never do this, pat myself on the back. I honestly don't remember when this happened, Marcus. But I'm glad to read I got a good report. It wasn't some other thing you were saying. So when did that take place? Was this in Toronto or was I out west?
This was Ottawa.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, that's where I started with Howie Wagman.
Right, the old Wagster. Yeah. He's not that old, but I have to throw that in there. That's right. So, and you did well. You did well, as I recall. You had a good set.
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, I don't remember you having a bad set. Put it that way. But
no, you would if you had said that and I had a bad set, that would have been more memorable and funnier, really.
It would have been more ultimately worthwhile as a comedic thing, but it's a nice thing. So, thanks for writing that in there. That was really nice to read.
Well, I appreciated the compliment and the encouragement in a very competitive, bone-crushing business.
You know, I'm just sick and tired of contests and all that kind of thing. Look, what's your favorite comic? You know, it's so different. You know, are you really going to tell me that, Dave Chappelle is better than Seinfeld, is better than, Robin Williams is better than, there's just, like, why limit yourself? What's your favorite thing at a buffet? Does that really need to happen? So
the Western mind categorizes everything.
Yeah, and we're the best at doing that, by the way. The Western mind is the best, and so down it goes.
Crush the competition.
Absolutely crush it. So let's tell.
It's the same with cannabis. There's the spiritual, the recreational, and the medicinal, and they're hard to delineate and decipher.
But you can't do that. Everybody tries, but there's no point doing that.
I think it's teaching us something with that.
Yeah. I think it's teaching us a lot of things. So here's what we're going to do. I want to tell people who you are a little bit first, because we've been Facebook friends for a long time, but I didn't know you were diving into becoming an author, and this is a very envy-inspiring task you've taken on, because I'd like to write a book. You've written a book, and I just want to hear, like, what is your transition? You're a comedian, so I saw you in Ottawa, and I was encouraging your stand-up, and now you're telling me, thanks for the encouragement, I wrote a book on psychopharmacopoeia. So that's not exactly what I meant that night. I just meant, get up there and tell a bunch of jokes. And
now you tell me.
And now you've turned it into this great, I'm so glad that with these few words I was able to inspire such a great work by yourself. That's so cool. So
just inspiring a work ethic in general.
Yeah. So tell the folks, a little bit of the truth. I mean, let's say you were some guy, you got into comedy. Now, you didn't have this psychonautic desire to categorize these things yet at that time, did you?
Shortly after I started stand-up, I had experience in 1995 on mushrooms and an antidepressant called dizipramine. And it was a full-on rebirth kind of event. And it inspired me to start researching. And I had an internet connection in Carleton University Library, and that's where it started. And I started doing stand-up a year later.
Oh, okay. Well, so you were already on some kind of pharmaceutical?
I was at the time. I had this mushroom experience that I think it somehow influenced the course of the events. Normally, you would dissociate under extreme stress like that, but I have a feeling that the dizipramine prevented that from happening. And I talk about that. I go into the details of it, but I had a lot of depression and trauma and so on, and so my reaction to mushrooms was explosive, and I had this incredible, epic decompression that came out of it. And I realized when I read Stanislav Grof's work that he was facilitating these experiences in his studies.
Okay, let's just go back a little bit to this. Okay, so you had already taken mushrooms for whatever reason prior to this.
Who's Your Daddy was the party. It was the most trivial enterprise you can imagine. Going to a party called Who's Your Daddy. Yeah.
You went to a party called Who's Your Daddy, yeah. So so when you're taking this what was it called? Dizipramine, or what was it called?
Dizipramine.
Dizipramine. Okay. So you were taking that for some time. And then you took okay, so here's what I'm trying to say. At one time in your life, you were a fella who wound up doing mushrooms, so you know what that's like on its own. Then later on, for this depression, you were on this strangely unpronounceable drug for me right now, and you took that for a while, and then while you were on the course of that, you took mushrooms again, and this was a different mushroom trip than the other times when you had not mixed it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say why it specifically transpired the way it did. Before we went to the party, my friend had stolen an Omni magazine, and there was an article in there by Albert Hoffman about how promising LSD was in the treatment of alcoholism and depression. So that was a kind of a synchronistic event that occurred right before I had this breakthrough.
Was it really synchronistic, or was it just waiting for you the whole time?
Well, it feels very synchronistic.
Yeah. I think when a lot of those things happen, I'm making fun of that notion right there with that particular voice, but I'm making fun of it. But I also happen to see that it comes in cycles, that I get grounded sometimes and in a certain place, and I haven't been that way for a couple of weeks, and it's super frustrating. But when a lot of coincidences and timing issues, I mean, I was into a stretch there for a while with some heated revelations and all kinds of psychotic revelations where stuff was happening like a sitcom. Like as soon as you would put the phone down, there was a knock at the door, you know. It's like, then you got to go to the door. As soon as you put that down, then the phone goes off. You have to call someone else. And the timing of a lot of these things was, ridiculous compared to usual. But so you realized during this, I'm already on this deprazone thing or whatever, and you take the mushrooms, you had a what was so different about this particular journey that caused you to go, wow, that was incredible, I better research this approach?
Well, to back up a little bit, a year prior, I was taking to complicate it a little bit more, but in terms of understanding the context, it's kind of essential. Because so a year before I took Prozac, and I went to see an ex-girlfriend, and it was a very neurotic ex-girlfriend situation. And I was new to smoking cannabis at the time, and I had some BC weed, which is why I later would move out here. But at the time, it provoked a massive panic attack. And I got quite depressed. I lost a lot of weight. I got really bad psoriasis. It was not a good situation. I dropped out of school. And then a year later, I was taking dizipramine and had this mushroom trip. And this time, the panic built and built and built, whereas before, the body would become exhausted and then it would kind of reset. Whereas with this, it wasn't doing that. It continued to accelerate and intensify until it reached a self-organizing critical state, is how it's described in the research, I guess. And I was transformed.
A self-organizing critical state. Is that what you said? That's the term, huh? Okay, so what does that mean, sir? A self-organizing...
Well, in a complex system, if you drive novelty high enough, eventually it reaches a self-organizing critical state, and it's a different kind of intelligence that can be accessed.
Okay, that's incredible. And does that happen? Does that happen strictly as the result of a chemical interaction?
Well, it happens in minor ways all the time, but to have a massive breakthrough like that requires the defenses that would prevent it from happening are somehow undermined.
So was it like an explosion? I mean, you're freaking out, you're going nuts, it's getting terrible, and then all of a sudden you figured everything out. Is that what you mean? Or?
I wouldn't. It wasn't a cognition. It wasn't an idea that I came to. It was an experience or a feeling. It was like some sort of mathematical process ran its course. That's the perception I had. Wow. But I'm not coming from life from a religious background. Coming at it from a math and science. I was raised next to a nuclear research facility, so I just looked at it in terms of biology and mathematics, and other people would use better metaphors that might be better, or different metaphors, sorry, like religious metaphors and so on.
Right. Well, we get lots of those. That's okay. I like yours.
Yeah.
So now you've experienced this and you start to research it, and your research was showing you, if you mix these two together, then you can. Is that the path that you use to become intelligent enough to write this book?
They hadn't mixed the two together. That was just my experience. That they never dizipramine and antidepressants and psychedelics have not been used together at all.
Right.
They're considered contraindicated. I think with the research now, they're so careful that they're not taking any chances whatsoever. But there can be interactions. But they did sometimes use methamphetamine with LSD psychotherapy or Ritalin with LSD psychotherapy. But generally, it was just LSD. In the case of Hollywood Hospital, it was LSD and mescaline.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to Hollywood Hospital for sure. So then, and did this? So you were rolling with this for a while before you started doing comedy?
Yeah, this was this had happened exactly a year before. I don't know that I would have had the courage to deal with the terror of
of getting on stage.
Yeah, it's brutal. So I don't know if I think it gave me a little bit of confidence.
Well, a lot of people, I think you could have gotten up there. I got to take umbrage with something. Most of the guests on this show completely agree with me all the time about everything. You're going to be the guy I got to disagree with. That's not even, listen, that's not something you need to worry about. All right, so here we are I want to touch on a few things that you spoke about because From this preface of the book and the introduction of the book, you set out a really fantastic tone. Folks, you really want to check this out. Support a Canadian author, for starters, whether you're Canadian or not. Shamanic Graffiti. And we'll get to Frank Ogden shortly. But listen to this. In the preface, I wanted to do a book once that had like a preface and an introduction and a primer and you're halfway through before chapter 1 starts. But anyway, at the end of this preface, it says, "I believe," this is you speaking here, sir, "I believe that in 10 to 20 years, all around the world, in universities, hospitals, and specialized clinics, neuronauts will take a range of psychedelic medicines about 1 to 10 times over 6 months with a male and female therapist. And over the next 200-plus pages, I will make my case and hopefully build a bridge from my vision of the future." So your vision of the future, Marcus, to fast forward, I mean, this is the end of the preface, but it's the end of your thesis. And a lot of other words with S in it. Ethos, system. There's two in there. There's two in system. So over the next 200 pages, you want to make the case that in 10 to 20 years, And I won't even hold you to the 10 years. Let's go to 20. All around the world in universities, hospitals, and clinics, neuronauts will take a range of psychedelic medicines for about 1 to 10 times over 6 months with a male and female therapist. So what you're saying is, or not, what you're trying to tell me here is that you see we are now struggling just with fighting to get cannabis accessible for people, with a lot of other paranoid people upset about it. But you're saying, never mind all that, we're going to be down into this other stuff for the next 10, like talking acid and mushrooms and everything else, and this is going to help us.
MDMA and psilocybin are on track to be prescription medicines in 2021.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. MDMA has been given breakthrough status for post-traumatic stress disorder in the United States, and there's research going on here in Vancouver. And ketamine for depression. There's 12 specialized clinics in the United States that give you 6 infusions of ketamine. It's quite effective for treatment-resistant depression. It can save a lot of lives.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so and you and the therapist would be the practitioner, the doctor, or whatever. Like in a shamanic setting, it's the shaman or the ayahuasqueros or whatever that make sure everything's okay. All right, well that's great. Let's see from also from the book. We want you to talk about the Hollywood Sanitarium. I used to walk by that place all the time when I lived there. But here's something. It says here. The second most important event was being sexually abused as a child. Trauma primed me for an explosive reaction to psychedelics that reverberates to this day. Depression and alcoholism are overrepresented on my family tree, and when a sensitive nervous system meets a vicious and uncompromising world, an angry, ruthless suffering is the result. Not that my life has been a miserable one. For as I would ultimately learn, it was in the misery itself where the mystery of transformation lay. This is another version of the answer to your problem is in the problem.
Yes, for sure. Every problem contains its own solution. King Arthur, when the knights went to find the Grail, he told them to go to the darkest part of the forest.
I've been finding that out a lot of times in other ways as well. So this was a realization that came to you with the use of this stuff. Like you would say that since you've been using this, you're able to compare your brain usage, say before how you used it and now how you're using it to obtain things. Like you weren't writing a book in 2003.
No, but I came across an excellent opportunity. It was more about that. When I met Frank, I had the chance and I had the files.
Right. Okay. One more thing from here is I really wanted to talk about this and just share your go to the outer reaches of your descriptive abilities, if you will, to talk about this. Regarding the use of this stuff, it says, whether communist or capitalist, Christian or Muslim, no power structure embraces psychedelics, possibly because their use seems to dissolve structure. Just talk about that for a little bit. What kind of structure are you talking about? The following the orders kind of laws and rules in the written books of the religions?
Cultural operating systems. There's the Timothy Leary's 8-circuit model, which says that the brain is imprinted, and you get a reality tunnel, and then you can only adjust it very mildly from there, and that's why people are so ideological and emotional and irrational. Wow. So I think that psychedelics facilitate a state of unconditioned consciousness, where you can transcend those imprints, at least for a little while, and possibly facilitate new ones. I mean, this is all very early stages. Yeah, but
you're down the road on it. I mean, you've been doing the work. You've been going right down into this. That most of them gained over the years. Many Zen monks realized most of them had gained their first view of the spiritual path while on psychedelic drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always been interesting to me that that this topic, this particular topic, is so. It just seems so much like the the Wizard of Oz in that you're not supposed to know everything. Just
Mm-hmm.
take this part and run with this. You don't really need to know that. And if I'm going to teach you all these things about my religion and you're going to come to my church every Sunday, and then you start to get these different insights available from this plant or whatever growing in the ground or something, that's not cool for them.
Mm-hmm.
And
tends not to be.
Yeah,
it's unpredictable.
Unpredictable. I think so much of it has to do with, it's definitely tied to the laws.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
There are people connected to the laws and connected to these beliefs. Like if everybody knows everything you know and we're able to write in that book, how governable are we as a society?
That's quite a question. It depends on how many amoral, immoral sandwiches we're having.
Toasted or grilled?
But Rick Doblin, the president of MAPS, Multiple Disciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, who has really done a lot, says the slogan is tune in, turn on, and go to the bake sale.
Turn in, tune on, and go to the bake sale.
Yeah, so his contention is that psychedelics can be integrated seamlessly into mainstream society. And as far as psychedelic therapy goes, I think that's probably basically true.
Right. Huh. Okay, so you also work, I'm going to get back to the book in a minute. I want to talk about Frank Ogden and remind everybody who he is. But
sure.
I just want to mention to everybody, too, that Marcus contacted me one day with a fascinating multi-pointed email that said, or a text rather, whatever it was, that said that you were working at you work at a place that also, you're at this end of the deal with the book, and we're going to spend most of the time there, but you're also working at an opioid what do you call it? What's the name of it?
Opioid substitution program. Opiate substitution program with Eden Medicinals.
Eden Medicinals. Okay, great.
Yeah, we're giving capsules to on the downtown east side to people with opiate or other drug addictions or pain problems.
Right, and they
for free.
They just walk in and say, "Gee whiz, I'm on opiates. Can you help me out?"
Yep.
And what kind of thing do you provide, or what's made available for them?
It's 25 milligram full spectrum THC with medium chain triglyceride coconut oil for absorption.
Oh, nice.
And we're doing a study with UBC, and we're working with StatsCan, and basically we give them the capsules and they give us the data.
Okay. That's great. And tell us, while we're on the subject, I know a little bit about this, but since we're here, and I didn't plan to talk about it, what's the deal with the synergy between the alleged synergy or the actual synergy between mixing the coconut oil with the cannabis? What does the coconut oil bring to it?
I don't know exactly how it works, but I think cannabis isn't very bioavailable orally.
Okay.
So if you add the apparently medium chain triglycerides specifically, it gets into the stomach more, and you don't lose as much of it.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so Frank Ogden is a much older man than you. Tell us about how you met him. Tell everybody who he is, and describe a little bit about how you guys put this book together.
It's hard to describe Frank Ogden, but he also was a futurist under the name Dr. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
He served in World War II as a flight engineer. He became a pilot. He owned a company that sold small airplanes, and then he read about LSD and sold his business and moved to Vancouver and said, "I'll work free for you for a couple of weeks and then see if you could afford me." And he became the resident therapist for 5 years, at the big 5 years at Hollywood Hospital when they were quite busy.
Wow. A resident therapist at Hollywood Hospital. Okay, that was on New West, right? New West.
Yep.
Yeah. So
6th and 6th.
6th and 6th. So tell us about that place. That was one of those creepy. I'm sure they used it in a lot of movies for all kinds of things.
Yeah, they it was an old house that was converted into a private psychiatric hospital. And Ross McLean, who owned it, screened in a porch and made a clinic specifically for LSD mescaline therapy, which wasn't really uncommon at the time. There was a mental hospital in Britain that was built specifically for LSD therapy. Stanislav Grof in Prague had a 17-bed locked wards exclusively devoted to LSD therapy in 1967.
Wow.
But Hollywood Hospital had one too, and this was a private clinic. I don't know of any other ones where it was a business.
Right, and you said they were doing well as doing the societal great fantastic function of helping people out.
Mm-hmm.
They were also financially profiting.
They were making a lot of money. It was about $3,000 a session in our dollars. The subsequent sessions were half as much.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. So, where are you now with your practice? You're not a doctor, but what's your regular, at the risk of using a doctor word, practice of, like, what is your practice of using these items?
I do every 3 months before the solstice and equinox. I cleanse for the Monday till the Saturday. And then I get up and I'm a hot yoga teacher, so I usually do some hot yoga or some yoga. And then I trip on like not necessarily micro doses, but very, very low doses.
Right.
Of various legal entheogens.
How do you do that? You take a little tiny hit of acid and you have like a razor blade and some telescopic eyewear or something, or how do you microscopic eyewear?
It doesn't literally have to be microscopic to be a microdose. It's just a low dose.
Okay.
Just to cut off a sliver.
Cut off a sliver. And how do you find, because I've microdosed only with other substances such as mushroom. I've never microdosed. I haven't even done LSD in quite some time. Like a week and a half or something. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't done it for years and years.
Yeah,
and I'm not, it's everybody's own thing or whatever. But I haven't done it in such a long time. But I've microdosed with mushrooms to what I found was a successful approach for depression. And what I basically did was I took a gram of mushroom, which would normally not be enough if you wanted to have a good old time. You might want at least a gram and a half. And then on up to the the heroic dose, but what I was using was 1/10 of 1 gram, and basically cutting it up with an X-Acto knife, which I obviously didn't fly into the country, and I used it to be able to cut it into 10 pieces, and I can assure you there is absolutely no psychoactivity from this tiny little dose whatsoever. 10 doses out of a gram, but it did help kind of lift the fog. After 3 or 4 days, you start to feel like, it's still doing something. It's just, you're not tripping out, but it's doing something. So
I feel microdosing feels like antidepressants to me. There's like a basic bioamine surge that comes from that. It's quite useful.
So
quite enjoyable.
When you take acid, though, in the same way with these microdoses, do you feel any of the psychoactivity, or is it just?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You do, eh?
I'm so sensitive to it because my body is empty basically. So it's a high enough dose that it's psychoactive, and then I do psychedelic prayers by Timothy Leary, which is based on the Book of Changes by Lao Tzu. So I've done this now 51 times.
What does that mean? 51.
Since 2004, before each equinox and solstice, this now adds up to 51. This will be my 52nd time, and it's coming up in a few days.
Oh my God! I hope I'm not making you eat something right now and blowing your regimen. No.
Well, I'm gonna have to cleanse from amoral sandwiches at least.
I guess so. Yeah, I'm never gonna live that one down.
Well, that's precisely what it is, though. It's a perfect description.
Okay, so I just was curious because with the mushroom doses so low, like I'm pretty sure that if I were going to try this, what you're doing, I would have to be, I'd have to have a schedule blocked off. Like here's 3 days where nothing's going on.
Yeah,
and that's been
you want to. Well, at the very least, you definitely have to have one day that you're late, or at least one afternoon.
Yeah, blocked off that you could just go, oh, that's a slight. I remember what acid is like. I'm sure when it started to come up again, it's like, oh yeah, this again. But you don't get as high, right? You're just not.
No.
But so when you're in that state, just let's call it just perched on the edge of the acid psychoactive zone, the state of being that you're in there, dialing it down to such a low measure. I mean, you can be seeing all kinds of things and hallucinating like crazy and imagining things, but you're basically functioning in the world, in the society, okay with just this little sliver. But you're still running all the data that you're taking in through through coming up on that small dose, and I'm fascinated how that feels. I guess I have to try to do it, but to be able to make those decisions, like, are you hopping on the bus and what are you doing down there?
No, I'm not hopping on the bus. I actually now I have a projector, so I watch fractals and listen to Lao Tzu's thoughts, and but I don't ride the bus. Try to stay in.
Keeping off that Hastings thing for your acid trips.
But this year it's St. Paddy's Day, so I'll break my cleanse by going to see a Pogues cover band called Shane's Teeth.
Oh, that's cool, in Vancouver somewhere.
Yeah, Wise Hall in Vancouver. Yeah,
that sounds good. So when you were writing the book, were you partaking of it? Did you try any of the actual writing of the book while you were on the substances?
If you write sober, edit high. If you write high, edit sober. I tend to like to get both.
So you hit it from both ends, and you have to alternate chapters to do that and really see how it turns.
No, you don't do that. You want to go over. I think in Greece in the parliament they used to look at each piece of legislation drunk and then sober.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. I think they allowed austerity to come at them while they were drunk then. Hey, I wanted to bounce this thing off. I was going to get it into the news earlier, but I wanted to get your take on this too. This is kind of fascinating. Back to the cannabis thing quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You recall this will be of interest to our British listeners. Thanks for listening over there in the. Is it still Great Britain? Is that what they call it? Anyway,
Yep.
Grenfell survivor. You know the tower that burned last year. There was a tower that caught on fire in London and collapsed to the ground. And apparently they didn't use the right cladding. They rushed the job. It was substandard across the board in so many ways, apparently, in the actual construction of the thing and the practices that they used to keep it safe. And none of these guys have been, and by that I mean the architects, the city engineers, anybody that passed the permit that allowed for the creation of this, basically a death trap where so many people were killed in this fire. Jesus. And here we are almost pretty much a year later, and this is on Russia Today, or what they call RT.com, but it's still a real story, everybody. Try to get yourself together there with that fake news thing. I think RT covers everything else really well, and they're terrible about Russian politics. And then and then in the States, it's the other way around. You know, they talk about the States and they don't know what they're talking about, and they ignore everything else in the world. But it says here the Grenfell survivor. A survivor of this disaster was arrested after a cannabis oil factory was found in his particular area of the tower. How about that? A blaze survivor faces jail after a cannabis oil factory was found in the wreckage of the 24-story building. He'd produced, and this is funny to me, he produced enough cannabis oil to last one user 140 days. But then later on, their numbers are kind of skewed, and that's not really what it is.
They always get those numbers wrong.
They
just inflate them. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But this whole story focuses on the fact that the magistrates heard that the store of cannabis cuttings and the butane gas canisters found in the 35-year-old's flat were but they never say that this is what caused the fire and that this is the inferno that killed 71 people. Jesus. And leaving hundreds homeless. Yeah. And they haven't busted anybody in the way of there were so many problems with it a year ago. We were hearing so much about it. Now this one guy they really like to demonize cannabis across the board. Oh, yeah. So now we're getting back to your book in that talk about this thing called anecdotal, like it's a weapon.
Yeah.
And it's only anecdotal. The stuff that you write in your book, the things that are in here, I'm sure anybody of official capacity would be happy to call it anecdotal. But like the whole thing is anecdotal. But they're able to, and when I say they, the powers that be, they'll put something on display as, look how dangerous this is. Here's a boy whose mother came home and she bought this thing and something happened and they put this giant construct together and that's why this thing's illegal. But when people have stories like the one I have and what you've been able to learn, it's this big problem, and it's all it's just a cockamamie wives' tale. So they get to flip that around all the time. How do you deal with that? I mean, I think about it all the time. Do you just let it roll off your back?
Well, I mean, in the case of psychedelic medicine, the solution is to do methodologically sound experiments that follow all those rules. Because in the 60s, a lot of the therapists didn't want to bother with that stuff, and we know it works, and they're very kind of touchy-feely Jungian or even Freudian types.
Yeah.
And they said, we're not going to do it like that. And that was a mistake, a big mistake. And now it's all done with placebos and independent raters and controls. Yeah. It's not anecdote. It's data that way.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to do it. I don't know how to exactly move my own, other than just, I'm gathering and collating all of the doctor, basically like everything I got from the hospital or a doctor. It's just one after the other in a binder and sort of drawing the story out from there.
Well, people are skeptical.
Oh, God, yeah. They should be skeptical. But when you really hit them with a lot of things, they're still skeptical.
But even with your story, people are skeptical.
Oh, I don't blame them for that. I don't blame people for that. I used to. I used to blame them when I was new at this. When I was a cannabis comedy virgin. When I got going on it, because I just thought, look, I was so screwed. Now I'm doing great. What's the matter with you? Why don't you see this? Then I realized, most people didn't see the transition from myself being relatively healthy, super healthy, actually, down into this nadir of existence and then back up again. And it's an unlikely story. I know that. I know all the reasons why you would think it's ridiculous and hard to believe, and that's totally fine. I get it. The folks that are open, though, are benefiting from it, and those are the three cuts of people, and you like that too. It's like this is the lower people at the lower end of the spectrum. Let's call it. I don't mean that as an insult, but just three bands of folks, and the biggest band is the band at the bottom. They don't want to hear it. They don't believe it. It's nonsense and ridiculous, and my hair's too long, and that's that. Then there's the folks at the top that I would say, such as you already know, you already get it, you're already aware of these things, and I'm preaching to the choir in that sense. I'm trying to talk to the folks in the middle who are open enough to realize, okay, I've done this and that and the other thing, and I'm not getting a result, and I've helped a lot of people in that category. That's where I've been able to bring most of my worth, and I'm not trying to chase the majority of folks who are never going to believe it. I just I'm kind of tired of speaking with them, but.
Do they still get conventional treatments in addition to the cannabis oil?
Some people do. Yeah. I mean, it just depends on the person. I mean, I know that I doubled down. When they told me about it at the beginning, I'm getting on the cannabis train, absolutely. But when they told me there was no other application available, not that I wanted chemo, but they said it was too far out to get that, and it wasn't going to do anything. And the same with radiation and surgery, and just take these pills, And so I didn't like that too much. But then there was this one, I talked about it earlier in the show, this testosterone suppressant. I took that, for a few months. And then I thought, oh, this is terrible. But I doubled down on it. And later, a couple of years later, I took a shot of radiation to the back because things were so crazy at that point. But that was off a bad period of bad weed and a crash back in the hospital. But I just... I'm not going to ever try to. As soon as I realize, look, this is already bloody unlikely across the board. Why expect everyone to totally understand it and get it? I just hope the people that really need it are open enough to try it out.
Well, it's bona fide in terms of clinical research that shows that when the THC binds to these receptors, the tumor produces ceramide and it engulfs the disease cell and leaves the healthy ones intact. I mean, we know that's true. Whether it's going to be strong enough to cure an actual cancer is a different story.
Right. It does seem to be. It does seem to vary, and it does seem to be. However, there's so many factors that haven't been quantified. This is what I would love to do, to be able to feel comfortable enough to write any kind of book. I would need to know. There are certain people like me who never had all of that chemo stuff and were only using the cannabis and also, in my case, this testosterone suppressant. Then there are people who they've done everything, and they do the cannabis later on after everything seems to have failed. And they go, oh, okay, I'll try it, and then maybe that doesn't work either because by that time you're so riddled. It's hard to say. So you can't say, oh, cannabis didn't work for that guy, but it did work for that guy. Maybe I had a cleaner slate for the good green to come in the first place. It's
tough to put people into placebo groups when it's cancer too. I mean, I'm sure they do, but Sorry.
That's going to
You
be
get the dummy pill.
a great understatement on a T-shirt. I don't want to sit on the bus wearing that. It's probably inflammatory, but oh God. So anyway, yeah, I just thought I'd bring that Grenfell survivor thing because we are also speaking to folks in England, and this is a propaganda going on. I think there's not one thing in there where they're alleging that this guy caused the fire, and they're not going after the folks that did cause the fire. The shoddy
British have an obsession with skunk.
Yes,
they're always going on about skunk, and it's just a kind of a slang term for sensibilia that comes out of Holland and something, and they're 90% of the weed is skunk.
Are you up on what's going on with them right now? And I was going to talk about this as well today, so I might as well bring it in with you because this is from the Telegraph and many other publications, I might add, including Nova Ordem News, greenpassion.org, thetelegraph.co for mainstream, etc., etc. And what they have here is the story on almost all cannabis on Britain's streets is super strength and could be driving mental health problems.
Yeah.
This is a big story right now. And they say that most of the cannabis in Britain is now skunk. It could be fueling the rise in mental health problems, they say. Researchers at King's College London tested almost 1,000 police seizures from Kent, Derbyshire, Merseyside, Sussex, and found 94% were dangerously high. In 2005, just 51% of cannabis sold was also skunk. So there's been a big increase. Are people really going to be going insane, Marcus? Is that what's happening?
Well, that argument is undermined by the fact that when cannabis use went up 30 times in the 1950s, schizophrenia did not go up at all. So and same with IQ. IQs are going up, but as cannabis goes up, it's not going down. So I think it can trigger and exacerbate certain kinds of mental illness.
Right. So wouldn't it be the case that, if you had a child that had a peanut butter sandwich and then started to lose his ability to breathe, maybe you've just found out that your kid is peanut sensitive, like a lactose intolerant kid or a peanut kind of thing.
Sure.
And it's the same. I think it could be very much. I don't see this proposition anywhere, but how about the fact that some people, for whatever reason, and there may be more than one reason, it affects their personal hardwiring in a negative way. And when you find that out, you just don't get to have that thing. Like some people can't have wheat.
Sure. But a lot of people who are have psychosis aggravated by cannabis want to keep smoking cannabis, which is kind of peculiar. But also CBD has been proven now a couple of times over to be an antipsychotic. Just as good as the antipsychotics out there are really hard on you. But you have to take 600 to 800 milligrams. In the studies, they're taking 600. That would cost you like hundreds of dollars a day right now.
Oh, I can't do it. I can't do that. So, so the CBD, that's what they say. I lost my thread there. The antipsychotic, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Antipsychotic, yeah.
What is that? I mean, I guess it's going to take you off of your high, but what kind? Is that a drug also? I guess some kind of
CBD is one of the cannabinoids. There's the main ones are THC and CBD.
Right, and that's going to take you off of your.
Yeah, it's for some reason we don't really know very much about how it works. It works on many different systems, but for some reason it's takes away the voices and all that stuff.
Voices. Yes, I'm sorry I'm laughing, folks. I probably shouldn't be doing the show today. I'm laughing at somebody's terrible situation right now. I don't mean to do that, but come on, the voices. You heard the voices?
I never heard the voices.
No. You never heard the voices? Okay.
But apparently smoking weed lowers IQs and causes hallucinations. So not only do you hear voices, but they're fucking morons.
Oh God! That's
working on a bit there.
Yeah, working on a bit. Yeah, I know. That's okay. Why wouldn't they be, right? Like, especially if they're the entities of people that have lived and died. I mean, mostly we're dealing with morons most of the time anyway. So probably a good chance that the folks that are pestering, why do we always assume these fuckers always have access to the truth and use it all the time, right?
Sure.
This netherworld gang of freaks, they're probably just, they're just having fun with us. Anyway.
Who knows?
Let's get back.
But serene psychotics are supposedly the most enlightened.
Serene psychotics?
People. Yeah, they're hearing voices and they're hallucinating and they're having delusions, but they're totally content.
Well, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a sign of enlightenment.
That's a sign of enlightenment. It's like having your own GPS all the time about everything, all the time. I think I'll have that sandwich over there. No, don't have that sandwich. Have the amoral immoral sandwich.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. It's like you get the two things on your shoulder. Okay, if you think of anything you want to say at any time, please jump in. I always say that to every guest because this is a discussion.
Now you tell me.
Yeah, sure. I want you to. I thought it was inherently available this knowledge.
I got it.
Okay, so my quick question, we'll dive to something else after this, is that are we going to see, what are we going to see in the wave of this super strength skunkweed in Britain? And everyone's going crazy. Is this Reefer Madness 2018?
Exactly what it is. It's a tabloid scare story. But the British are obsessed with madness. It's what makes them so interesting.
That is such a great racist shot. And you can get away with it too because number one, it's funny, and I'm of British extraction, so that's the one group I can hammer on, and that's so funny. So they have an obsession. Yeah, sure, they've got those ancient asylums and things, and
Bedlam.
Those old terrible places.
Those make you want to go crazy, though, to stay in this amazing Victorian mansion and walk around the fields and romantic.
You think Probably the Queen ever wraps her lips around a bong? You ever think they just,
Queen Victoria took cannabis tincture for menstrual cramps.
Oh, now I'm going to have to give you a ding right there. You can't put Queen Victoria and menstrual cramp in the same sentence. Right? If somebody's eating lunch right now. It's not even a fair shot.
She is my erotic obsession and always has. Because it's all about puritanism, and that just makes it very sexy to me.
I always thought as a kid, I couldn't believe that there was a succession of others to come out of that particular portal of entry into this ether. I just couldn't believe it. Her face looks like it looks like one of those hams you buy, that are, it's just the perfect shape with the string holding it tight and everything. Now I'm saying something offensive about a woman, so I'm going to be getting some kind of hate mail over this, even though she's worthy of reprehension. Listen,
as long as you get some kind of mail, that's what I see it.
You get exactly. Every kind of mail is some kind of mail, or whatever Gene Simmons said. So while all this is going on, you're writing this book. Now, I want to know what your plans are. I want to get back to this thing about how it's going to be in the future. Like, how do you see things going? Let's try to rein this thing in. I'm having so much fun. But why don't we talk about this? That society right now is riddled with people in almost all jurisdictions, with folks who are having a really tough time winding up. They're addicted to opioids. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to push cannabis situations out there where we're seeing that, you get a drastic reduction in the states that have legal cannabis now. Yep. You're finding the opposite of so much of what the fear-mongering from the officials is like, oh, my God, if we legalize this, all the kids are going to get it. And you find out that it's actually less access in those places. Once they know what it is and why it's doing what it does, it's less interesting, and it's not taboo anymore. It's not a taboo. People want to break taboos. It's not taboo. You're not going to break it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
How do you see things, down the road? You see like there's a clinic and somebody's on opioids or they need to go to the clinic, or are we going to be just dialing down the production of opioids, or what can we do?
Oh, I don't think we'll dial down the production of opioids. People love them. A certain segment of the population, only a third of people actually get euphoric from opioids. But, and cannabis can kind of wallpaper over the withdrawal. It's about a week or 10 days, and they can be very useful for that. But in terms of the giving your life meaning and the NUE and all that, that's a very tricky problem, particularly in the downtown east side where there's poverty, mental illness, trauma. It's so entrenched. So it's going to take a lot to fix that problem.
Yeah. But so at some point, though, like 20 years from now, let's say, let's give you benefit of the doubt and go for 20. So now it's 2038, 2040. And it's easily accessible to have someone guide you through some kind of psychedelic salvation for your lower-based problem of addiction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think ketamine could be used right now because it's already part of medicine, and
right.
There's as far as I know, there's no ketamine clinics for depression or addiction in Canada, and it's a travesty.
And the ketamine helps you get off of other things?
You can do, yeah. For addiction, they started researching it out in Russia, or at the time it was the Soviet Union. It was the last psychedelic research that was going on in the 80s. And there's a clinic in Florida called Ulysses that uses it. Okay. And then there's some research going on in Britain, but Canada has really lagged behind on this one.
That's too bad. They do that so many times. I thought BC was going to be like, Operation Central, but it's kind of strange now with cannabis and all these American giant corporations. It's going to be all owned by one hedge fund soon, and then they're just going to bring in the Monsanto gene splitters to punk down all the great strains into something.
Don't say that. Well, the customer doesn't want that, though. It's not like beans or rice or something. The customer wants cannabis the way they want it.
I guess so. I hope it stays on that track. Let's talk a little bit about your awarenesses. I keep dodging in and out of a poor network connection. It says, but I can hear you fine the whole time. Good thing we're not video. I wanted to ask about your awareness and direction and what you pulled out of. There's a book by Rick Strassman. This guy is an American, a very prominent researcher in the field of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and you reference him in the book quite a bit, and you talk about that. What kinds of lessons did you pull out from Rick Strassman?
Well, the DMT stuff seems to be a lot about contact, the experience of connecting with some kind of external intelligence. And he actually, I think, maybe he ran the full DMT course, but he stopped doing research because these experiences were very disturbing. But another thing he did was he did a psilocybin session, and he let the subject have her cell phone. And so when she started to have a difficult experience, she called her boyfriend, who came and got her, and then and then he stopped doing research from there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and that, don't let them have their cell phone. That's the lesson there.
Yeah, that's an awful thing. I've looked at the cell phone screen in an induced state, and it's just I want to put it down and get rid of it. It's probably a wise instinct.
Well, there might be trip advisors that you can get on your iPad or your iPhone with it before too long.
I guess so.
AIs that'll guide you through. Are you freaking out?
Are you freaking out? Go sit down over there. It's okay. Just take 10 minutes and go sit down over there. Yeah. So tell us about, what your interpretation is of the DMT is spoken of by Rick Strassman as a God particle, if you will, at the risk of offending the CERN fans. But the God essence, this thing. So what is your impression, and maybe you believe this fully, and maybe you're just aware of Rick, but just break us down, because you must have studied this a bunch to be able to write your book. What is Rick's, or what is your take of Rick's take, or whatever, on what exactly is going on there with that molecule?
His argument is, and there's a lot of criticism of it, but his argument is that the pineal gland is formed over 49 days, and the pineal gland contains DMT. So when the pineal gland is formed, the DMT becomes active in the pineal gland, and the soul enters the body. This is kind of the metaphors that he's using. And in Buddhism, when someone dies, you pray over them for 49 days, and then the soul goes into another body. So, I mean, it's a nice idea. I don't know. I've heard there's a scientist, chemist called David Nichols at Purdue, and he says that the DMT in the brain isn't enough to actually be active.
Right.
So he disputes that. But as far as the subjective experience of communicating with an external entity. I have experienced that.
You've
with
experienced
ayahuasca.
that. Okay, tell us about that.
And if I hadn't experienced it, I would dismiss it outright, utterly, from anyone else.
Right. So what
But,
you went through it, and you understand that if you were to tell someone this particular incident, that they're not going to believe it. You're not going to get frustrated at them for that.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so there may be a few of them listening, but I know the substance of which you speak, and I'd be fascinated to hear your take. This, once again, we're speaking with Marcus Rummery. He's a comedian originally. Well, not originally. I mean, you were born originally, but he's a comedian from Ottawa, Canada. Moved to Vancouver. I've met him a few times, and now he has this fantastic book out called Shamanic Graffiti, and it's co-written with your. We're going to get to your some of the points in this book. The table of contents itself is a read on its own. So, tell us about Stan Grof.
Stan Grof?
Yeah.
So Stan Grof, in 1956, was a junior psychiatrist in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and he took a large dose of LSD and under the influence of a stroboscope, which was being used to entrain brainwaves. And he had an experience of cosmic consciousness. And then he became the preeminent LSD psychotherapist. And he gave it to, at the time, the experimental protocol was give it to everybody. Schizophrenics, obsessive compulsive, depression, bipolar, everybody, and see what happens. And what he noticed was that generally people would abreact or relive traumas from their biographical life, surgeries, accidents, abuse, neglect, that kind of stuff. Right. And then they would get better sometimes, usually, but he would keep going. And they would have more sessions, and then they would actually get worse in some ways, and they would have experiences that were even more troubling and difficult. And through this, he came up with this idea of the 4 basic perinatal matrices. So he organized these intense experiences into 4 sections, which are related to the 3 clinical phases of birth and the one preceding it. So the first one is bliss. Second one is despair. Third one is rage. And the fourth one is liberation.
Wow, and that's great. That's great. I mean, you keep going, but that's amazing stuff. I can't wait to take a look into this.
Mm-hmm. He's still out there. I just did a webinar course. I actually got to ask him a question on the webinar. He's the greatest. I mean, he's the inheritor of Freud and Jung, and he takes it and adds a lot to it, particularly this idea of the perinatal matrices. And then the third level is the transpersonal, which is like past lives, archetypes, becoming a plant, or becoming like all humanity, or these kinds of things.
Incredible. All right, so you have another chapter in the book called Listening to Acid. So on that note, I'll just dovetail it back into, tell us a little bit about what that means, listening to acid, and weave it back into my original question of your experiences of, all of that magical stuff. I believe you mentioned ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm. Well, listening to acid is a play on words of listening to Prozac. I was comparing a patient of Dr. Kramer who wrote Listening to Prozac, who was elderly, and they didn't want to give him Prozac because they were worried about his heart. And then one of the Hollywood Hospital flagship cases was this 75-year-old with depression who they gave LSD to, and he had a full many rebirth experiences, and was cured of his depression. So that was the kind of a juxtaposition with that. But as far as the ayahuasca experience, it was this kind of a standard issue, psychedelic, geometrical, undulating, colorful, stroboscopic, kaleidoscopic stuff. But there was a feeling of a presence, and it was though it was scanning my body and giving me the okay sign, because I'm a hypochondriac, and it wanted to tell me that everything was fine.
Or you think you are anyway.
Yeah, or you think, yeah. Just because I'm a hypochondriac doesn't mean I'm not sick.
Right. So it scans you. It
feels like it's scanning me, and it's saying, okay, everything's good. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
And it was a sense of this loving presence. And as I kind of locked into it, it was so grateful to see me in it. The more I reached towards it, the more it reached towards me. And it was like, it was a love beyond anything that I've experienced on this realm, really. It was different. So yeah, and then it went away, and I've never had anything like that under any circumstances.
And where was that?
That was in Whistler with a shaman from Peru. This guy Mike, who was like a Reiki master and a ayahuasquero and a black belt in karate.
Ooh, that's a good combination.
He was a badass.
Yeah, that sounds
and
great.
He, you get the ceremony is designed specifically to facilitate experiences like that.
Yeah. And
my
how
God,
often have you done that many times? That particular?
I only did that once. I'd like to try it again, but
you're not.
But it's a bit of a secret society thing, and you got to really kind of work at it.
I think that's worthwhile though, because
for sure.
I got concerned about it years ago when I first learned about it. It was at a certain level of general awareness. You could never get anyone to. They'd say, "I what? What are you talking about?" And now more people know. And unfortunately, what's happened is that the genuine purveyors of many of these experiences, and when I don't mean your experience wasn't, but when you're down in South America in these places where they actually do it, there's a certain sacrosanct rule that is called set and setting. And it's a big deal. But what's unfortunately happened is a lot of people have just, like I'm afraid is what's happening with the cannabis industries. They just go, oh, this is cool. People want to come down here. They'll pay money to do it. Let's just drum up a bunch of shitty booze from some plants and tell people it's something. And people are getting ripped off, It's proliferating. As soon as someone gets a good idea, here come the knockoffs is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Opportunists.
Yeah, opportunists.
Yeah, you'll have cops that fought ayahuasca. Now they're opening an ayahuasca center because political winds have shifted.
Yeah, sure. The Julian Fantino ayahuasca center for pleasurable experiences. Oh my God.
Yeah, let's stay away from that.
So are you going to? Is there going to be another book from you? Are we going to get another one?
Yeah,
of these
I'm working on the Shamanic Future trilogy. So the second book is Shamanic Enneagram: Change Your Life with the Number 9.
The number 9. Tell us about that.
It's a science fiction self-help novel.
Okay.
And I actually just did a seminar on the Enneagram of personality, which is this system of 9 personality types. And you have to, as each type has to become like a different type. So for instance, I'm a 4 and I need to become like a 1. And a 1 is rational, principled, orderly, and disciplined. So it's a personality type that actually gives you a direction, not just a diagnosis kind of.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm really happy with this. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get further into it, but this is just judging by what I was able to dive into, several pages from several of the chapters. How's that for honesty? I didn't read the. Well, I read it up to a certain point, but I only got a hold of it on Sunday, unfortunately.
But the way I wrote it is there's a headline to each chapter and each experience, and you can actually just read those.
Right, but I heartily endorse the book for sure. But I mean, I picked some of the things out of there. But yeah, great chapter titles, and you're really going to find out a lot of interesting things here, folks. What I like about it is that it's a manual for a pathway of creativity and awareness that is completely valid, has tons of research in it, and barely anyone is talking about it right now as a thing. It's a whole other way of being. I so much want to spend more time in these avenues of thought than what did Trump say about this thing and who wore what at the Oscars. I'm so tired of these regular tropes, I guess, and it's from the mind expansiveness that you use that comes to you when you start experimenting with these things. I think that's the basic. Would you say that's the basic fear that the rulers have? The more people start to figure these things out, the less, like I said earlier, like are we less governable because more people know these things? Absolutely. I think, and they've shown that people who have psychedelic experiences are more open. And I think that they are, there's in the 60s, they were afraid of that. Now, I don't know if they're really even thinking about it very much. Yeah. I don't know what they're doing, really. I just don't want them to get in the way of what I'm doing. That's all. Exactly. But we'll find out. I mean, I've certainly, gone about my day for 44 years without incident. And yeah. They don't seem to be oppressing me. Exactly. So, okay, well, we'll have to move on to another chat with you, Marcus. Absolutely. So here's the book again, Shamanic Graffiti, 100,000 Years of Drugs, 100 Years of Prohibition with Frank Ogden. you'll be back on sometime. Well, I will have read the book by then fully, and we will go into some other details and perhaps hear about your next venture. Where can folks reach you?
I am at therummery.ca. I have an author page on Facebook, Marcus Rummery.
Yes.
And I'm at the Rummery at Twitter.
The Rummery at Twitter. That's 2 M's, folks. Thank you very much, Marcus, for coming on and enlightening us with your enlightening book. It's really worth picking up. Take a look at it. Shamanic Graffiti. Thanks a bunch.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. That is Marcus Rummery from Vancouver, folks. He is a researcher of which not everybody can do that kind of thing. You know, you can't. Not everybody is designed to go down these avenues, but I'm glad people with this capacity, such as he, will go that far. I'm kind of keeping it tight to the cannabis v. cancer fight right now. And we still have a bit of show left. We have a few things that I have to get to, and one of them is we had a box from Wegmans. Is that it? Wegman, J.E. Wegmans. We had a box. It was called a ritual box. A ritual box. Make up your own jokes. We have a ritual box, and we need to give it away. And we had a contest going. We have another contest right now for Sam Malachi's book. But right now, let's see who the winner is. I'm going to reach into the drum. And this is like, pretend I'm reaching into the drum. Everything is virtual on the internet, okay? So I'm reaching into the big drum, and it turns out the name of the winner of the James E. Wagner. Remember, it's Wagner, actually. James E. Wagner we had a guest in a couple of weeks ago, and you'll remember his name is the winner's name. No, that's the winner's name. Get out of here. You're messing me up. The winners. Okay, let's just get right to the winner's name. The winner's name is Nolan Kinshella. Nolan is he's a green veteran. These are some folks I've asked to come on and speak about their experiences with cannabis. And if there are ever any of those, we're happy to have him on as a guest. But right now, Nolan Kinshella is the winner of the James E. Wagner Ritual Box. It's cool. A couple of jars, got some pre-rolls in there. Nice little thing to have to keep your stuff in. From James E. Wagner Ritual Box. So we thank them for helping us give that away to Nolan. And also, the current giveaway is the Great Cannabis Conspiracy book. This is the book that, of course, I was speaking with Paul Hartman earlier about Dr. Sam Malachi. He was one of Sam's patients, and we have his book. And it's still going on our socials, so just pop over there to @GreenCrushPod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @GreenCrushPod. That's where that is. That's where you can find out about us and what we're doing on the show, Green Crush, etc. We've already made $400. Now, I'm not here to brag. I know a lot of people have got a tough time earning a living these days, the way they've got the monetary system skewed. But I'm just going to brag and tell you that in the past almost year, 10 months or so, we've been able to pull in $400. So that's pretty cool. We are getting to the point where hopefully more people are going to learn some of the more delicate matters in and around cannabis, because it's so important that we understand what it is before we allow them to make the kinds of regulations that they're going to make with it, about it, and around it. And so far, a lot of them are not very fair. And so that's why we protest these things on this show. It has to be done. Real quick, Vermont just became the 9th state to legalize marijuana, and they have a different way of going about it, according to the Washington Post. Vermont is very cool. It's fascinating that when you break them, all they mean is that the rules are different there, and they have a different system of putting it out there. It's the first state to approve recreational marijuana legislatively. 8 other states, plus D.C., have passed legalization measures. But this particular fella, who is the the governor, Phil Scott, says, "I personally believe that what adults do behind closed doors and on private property is their choice." Is this guy sure he's a politician? So as long as it does not negatively impact the health and safety of others, that's a great rule. That is a great rule. So he signed that bill with mixed emotions, but he signed that bill anyway. That's the main thing. He is Vermont's a cool place if you ever get a chance to go down there. Very, very fun state to be in. I'm sure they have lots of local issues. Like the governor, he's got mixed feelings about it. He's got mixed feelings. Okay, so enter our contest to get into the book. To get to the book, Winning Possibilities. Right now, if you buy it properly on one of the right links on our page, you can maybe even win a trip to Jamaica. So here we go with, here's a problem that is, I did that already, the $2 gram. This is really good news. There's just came in today or yesterday, a Hull Aylmer MP. This is a Canadian MP. He is pledging to help clear pot offenders' records. And we've not heard anybody in the Canadian government make this kind of noise yet. He says he wants remedy for some of the 500,000 Canadians who have a criminal record because of marijuana possession convictions. He's a West Quebec MP pledging to help some of the hundreds of thousands. And this is what they have to do. I mean, they're doing it in San Francisco, other places in California. We really need to make sure, Greg Fergus is his name, we really need to make sure that it just can't be all about, bodacious profits by the few and the rest of the folks who've had their lives messed up from these erroneous incursions into their freedom are going to suffer anymore. Reparations need to be made. And that'll have to come out of the federal funds. I guess you won't be able to build your 10,000 outlets of cannabis in Ontario, after all, to keep pace with the LCBO. That's what needs to happen there. So good for him. I'm so great. I'm so great. I'm so grateful to have that kind of politician somewhere, anywhere. I really didn't think we were going to have somebody step up to the plate. And of course, just to put a final button on the ayahuasca stories of, I don't recommend it for anybody. You have to recommend it for yourself. It's not any kind of thing that I endorse or say you should go and do. You have to find that out. Just like that guy said from, Vermont, do it in your own home, do it in your own business, as long as you're not hurting somebody else. That's your thing. I happen to know that a lot of the insights and awarenesses that I got from ayahuasca helped me a ton with my particular cancer diagnosis. So that was good for me. Maybe you don't have cancer. Maybe you don't want to get this information. But the stuff that's coming down the pike in the commuter-sized newspapers is certainly not the reality that I really want to have much to do with anymore. I also forgot to mention to Marcus, if he's still listening, I wanted to get into the topic of iboga or ibogaine. This is another substance that is a shamanic medicine, and I'm sure it's listed in the book that I've yet to read. But I did want to talk about it, though, because it's also very good. Look it up yourself. Iboga can resolve and heal childhood trauma. Iboga, it's a tree in Africa. I don't believe it grows anywhere else in the world. I'm not sure how you get it. I don't sell it. I'm not a dealer. I'm just telling you to look it up, Iboga, and resolve your childhood trauma, won't you? Maybe dispel your alcoholism or your insecurities or your irrational fears of something if you take Iboga. And you only need to do it 1 or 2 times. And it has a far higher rate of the recidivism, they call it. It has a very low recidivism rate. You mean, in other words, you don't go back to the thing you were addicted to so many times when you use Iboga. This is another plant, folks. A plant that has rules and laws all around it. My goodness, you could barely recognize it. So that's what's going on with that particular issue. Folks are hiding things. While the police swear allegiance to the Queen, I'll tell you this one thing. It didn't take long. They've been working over this Grenfell situation to see whose fault it was the place burned down. They've been searching out all kinds of issues with cannabis and telling people it doesn't work when it does and ignoring test results that have come in when they've been good. And they have to spend a lot of time doing this, to get it right. but they don't always need a lot of time to get something done. Here it is in the independent.co.uk. Says here that a tiny ad hoc committee of MPs were able to...
The statutory instrument this morning is to implement the change from 15% to 25%.
15% to 25%. Okay, so we don't know what that means yet, but let's find out. It's gone from 15 to 25, almost double. Hang on.
The Sovereign Act 2011 is, of course, the mechanism through which the state gives the royal family the funding they need to carry out the services they perform on this country's behalf and maintain the royal palaces.
So we have to pay for the Queen's house is what it is. You know, they've got to do things, and they need a nicer house to do it from, I guess. So go on.
Buckingham Palace is an important historic property and one of London's top tourist attractions.
Yeah, it is. It is a top tourist attraction, yeah?
So it is clearly important that the royal estate is properly maintained.
Okay, so it's important that it's properly maintained. Well, I think the general rule is if you can't pay for the taxes and you can't afford the place, you're not allowed to stay in it. Isn't that generally the rule? Why do these people get this massive cash infusion here?
Prior to the Royal Trustees' review, a series of detailed technical assessments were undertaken to examine the material state of Buckingham Palace. These concluded that elements of the palace's essential services were significantly beyond the maximum useful life and required urgent replacement unless the palace is to be at serious risk, Mr. Bone, of fire, flood or safety incidents.
Yeah, they're worried about the palace in England susceptible to fire, flood, and safety incidents. But never mind all those people that died at Grenfell. And then these folks are doubling the expenditure. That's what they've done. They've raised it from 15 to 25%, not quite doubling it. It's in order to pay for a £360 million upgrade to Buckingham Palace because the Queen and all of those folks don't have enough money to keep it going themselves. So you got to do it. That's who we're swearing our allegiance to. That's who the cops are swearing their allegiance to. That's how everybody is swearing their allegiance to. And I don't care if you're in Australia or New Zealand or Canada or England or Ireland or whatever the hell it is. That is what is going on. They're swearing their allegiance to the Queen, and along with the allegiance, your money there as well. Gee whiz. Oh, boy. This has been episode 103, episode 31. Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. I'd like to thank my guest, Marcus Rummery, the comedian and psychonaut researcher. Did we really need a pause in the music for that? No, that's what's going to happen. Yeah, it is. It is going to do that. It is a system overload. I think we're at the end of the show. Thank you for tuning in. We have to go. We'll be back next week with another very exciting guest, I can assure you. Peace out.